You told us you have a hard limit of like 2 hours, and he goes, perfect, 90 minutes. I'm like, she didn't say that. That's all you. That's you just wanting to like not do this shit anymore.
We will never do a 4-hour episode. Hello, everyone. This is the Three Body
Not
Problem
with that
episode.
attitude.
Episode 1 out of 102. Oh my gosh, we're up to 102 of these things.
I can't believe you didn't have me on for the 100th episode. You know, you're gonna have to.
We were going to do a call-in show.
Really?
We said we were going to have a call-in show, and
Like
then we
a clip
didn't.
show.
Yeah.
We're calling
Yeah,
show. Oh my God, this
Juanito
cat
was
wanted
in
up
London
and now he
and-
doesn't. All right. There we go.
The cats will come. They'll
Yeah.
come at their own pace, right?
Costin is traveling in Turkey, so he's going to miss this week's show. We'll catch up with Costin's next week. But we have a fill-in buddy, of course, returning to the show. Katie Moussouris, head at Luta Security and an expert on all things export controls around software. Katie joining the show, obviously, to talk about the big story. And the only story to talk about, really, is the government, U.S. government's citing national security concerns, issuing export control directives to suspend all access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5 by any foreign national, whether they work at Anthropic or not, including Anthropic employees. And the net effect of this order is Anthropic announcing that they must abruptly disable Fable 5 and Mythos 5 for all customers to ensure compliance. Katie, you wrote an op-ed calling this misguided. Let's back up a second. Were you surprised at all that it got here?
So this all went down a week ago while I was on the way to the airport, and that's when I saw the research paper and, was asked if I wouldn't mind giving my independent, technical assessment and opinion. So I did, and then I got on the plane, and then when I got off, I guess the export control had dropped. So surprise.
Wait a second, slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Slow down. You mentioned a paper that you got as you were getting on this flight. Give us the whole
Ryan's
thing,
paying
the whole
attention.
background.
He's keyed in. He's like, a paper, you say?
Yeah, so there was
saw it.
this research paper, and I think more people have seen it now. It's still not public, but
It's by Amazon.com?
I mean, they only sent me the technical parts of this paper. They didn't send me the authors, right? But so I took a look at this paper, and I'm like, jailbreak? Why are they calling this a jailbreak? This is all defensive prompting. And I was kind of, with a wink and a nod, calling it defense-oriented prompting, like a nod to return-oriented programming, right? But I was like, is this a defense-oriented prompting? This is asking the model to fix this code, because it was refusing the straightforward request to find the security vulnerabilities, because the guardrails were saying, we're not going to do that for you. But fix this code worked in terms of getting it started on that path. So I read this thing and, I was like, this isn't a jailbreak. This is the model behaving as it should for defenders. This is find the bugs, help me write patches, help me write test scripts to test the patches. And it was being sort of contrived as this jailbreak out of Fable 5's guardrails. And I was like, yeah, this isn't a jailbreak. So I get on the plane and I land, and then export controls have dropped. So your question of, was I surprised? I think everyone was surprised. This was surprise. Normally export controls for software don't drop this fast, or there's a big lead up to it. And people are aware that it's coming. So I think it was a big surprise for everybody.
I mean, the obvious thing in the room, the obvious elephant in the room is Anthropic and the USG not having a healthy relationship prior to all of this. And the paper that Katie mentions, according to the public reporting, because I haven't seen it and I don't know what is true or not, but according to the public reporting, researchers at Amazon.com discovered this quote-unquote jailbreak and privately reported it to the U.S. government, and that prompted this immediate export controls thing. And I bring up the relationship between the two sides to put it into context about why it was so sudden. Juanito, we had some word from the government's AI czar, what's his name? David Sachs on the All In podcast that brought up two things. In addition to this jailbreak issue, he also brought up the issue of surveillance of Anthropic collecting data for 30 days. And there's this enterprise data storage thing. There's something we haven't discussed at all. Can you put it all into context, put it into perspective, bringing the relationship, the Sachs claim, the Amazon claim, like how did you read all of this?
You mean Amazon.com? Why do you sound like such a boomer when you say you're like, is this an Amazon.com report? Sorry,
AWS. Sorry.
No.
I'm old,
sorry.
man.
The cat. Okay, here we go, Toro. Let's do this. Okay, so it's a really interesting situation. Particularly, like, it was funny to hear David Sachs kind of basically saying a lot of the same shit we were saying on the pod, or at least I was saying on the pod last episode. Which is kind of terrifying in some ways, because I keep hoping that I'm caricaturizing the situation and everybody involved, right? Like, I keep hoping someone's gonna be like, dude, come on, like, these people are not, you're framing them like they're, like they're dumb and they're not engaged and they don't know what they're doing. And then, you hear what's happening in the background and you go, oh my God, this is as
The
bad
same
or
language
worse.
around, like, degrading results silently in the background, that kind of thing.
I mean, I have a lot that I want to say about the whole notion of the jailbreak and the guardrails, but just to like address your question about David Sachs and like surveillance, look, I think the surveillance claim is obviously going a little too far. There is something to be discussed about them needing to hold on to the prompting and all the like customer data for 30 days. I understand why, right? Like, you're doing trust and safety, and you really and really you're trying to see how this model is going to get used and how they respond. And what folks forget is, like, these are stochastic systems, right? It's not like Anthropic knows everything the model will do when they drop it, right? Like, they find out about things from users as well. So they do want to see these logs. Now, I think we're all so swept up in this Mythos stuff that none of the Glasswing companies are, for example, having a conversation about the fact that Anthropic just was like, hey, go scan all of your source code and we'll show you what the vulns are. And it's not your zero retention deployment. Your zero data retention deployment does not apply here. Sure, they're telling us that they're not going to do anything with all of the visibility into all of our source code, but they also don't talk about like having bought every book on Earth secondhand and then like setting it on fire. So, there's aspects to this that I feel like, we're running to be part of the hype train. Everyone is. And the things that we're sacrificing along the way are maybe should get just a smidge more thought.
Well, isn't it like, I mean, the retention thing, isn't it like keeping your network logs for a certain period because you're looking for attackers doing low and slow attacks, right? Isn't that the reason? I mean, how else would you capture certain material if it's spread out and not all clumped together and aggregated, especially points in time? So I think there's security precedent for that type of thing. If that's what they're using it for. But I think the bigger picture is that a lot of these things are not well defined, and when they're not well defined, it's anyone's guess. And I think that's something that all of these companies need to improve. They're too young. They're too young to know, what they need to explicitly define. And
I
it's the company's
being...
existence, right? I mean, but think about how bad every company was in its first decade of anything that they were trying to do, and they went from zero to global importance very, very quickly.
Yeah, but you're around, right? Like, I'm around, Ryan's around, the podcast is around, like, everyone's saying what's gonna happen. Like, none of us are surprised by anything, right? I think most of us are surprised that this shit went down the way that it did, because we're like, guys, like, we've been here. Some of the things you're saying, obvious self-owns, right? Like, that's what I wanted to discuss with the guardrails, not to keep kind of pushing it back, but this idea that I think that's the San Francisco, the startup valley forgiving thing of move fast, break things. But you're around, I'm around, Ryan's around. They have hired people that we know and respect, who I'm sure
paying super salaries to very, very brilliant people who we know. I mean, I know at least 10 people working at Anthropic that's been around the block forever. So this is why
So
it's
you
come
have
like, what
people
are you guys
who are
doing?
telling them that you have people who are for sure telling them. So I think, once again, like the problem is at the leadership level. I'm sure everyone's scared to tell Dario the truth. I'm sure that you have, we shouldn't ignore like the cultist bullshit from like the effective altruists who surround that, which is for sure a factor.
Really?
And then, dude, you think I'm kidding? I am not joking. Like,
I know
this
you pop this up on the podcast all the time. I don't know what even that means.
dude, I am not joking. You have these like people who are in this fucking doomsday cult of it's like Ayn Rand meets Skynet. Like, it's very bizarre, right? Like, but it's, you need to justify getting to be rich, and like you don't know how to deal with your fragile conscience. So instead, like, you kind of turn it into, oh no, I'm getting ultra rich for the good of everyone. And you go, yes, yeah, you are. We can see it. We can all feel it. But in any case, I think Cyber was one of their favorite boogie people. And
No, the man can keep that boogie. That's okay.
okay, fair enough. We'll own it. So, but this boogeyman that is Cyber, they've been using it for a while to stoke fear, because every time that people said, well, what do you mean the models are going to take over? Like, we just like turn it off. And they're like, no. The model controls don't matter because like the model will hack everything. And they go, yeah, but like it can barely serve enough tokens right now. No. You don't understand, man. Like, once we're past once it can find vulns, it can just shut everything down. You go, that doesn't sound right. You're like, no, you just don't get it. You're like, okay, enough. Right. But what do I keep discussing with this guardrail shit? Of course we're talking about this being a jailbreak. Like, Katie's absolutely right that this is like inane. But of course it's a jailbreak, because their notion of guardrails for Fable was like no cybersecurity anything. Like, Fable can't read a cybersecurity blog lest it get ideas. And you go, well, that's a stupid, super broad, completely useless, very idiotic, not nuanced way of guardrailing a model. And they even said it themselves in their comms. They're like, some people think our guardrails are too broad because they're so effective. And you're like, no, because they're so fucking broad. And then, of course, when somebody finds a way to like drive around this little gate that you've put in, you go, oh my God, Fable is free. It can do whatever. And you go, this is fucking stupid. The whole thing is fucking stupid.
Anthropic in its blog says, in fact, our safeguards are so strong that many users have complained that they're overly broad, which is kind of like a throw in there. That's not wrong. They also said, we reviewed a demonstration of this specific technique being used to identify a small number of previously known minor vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities all appear relatively simple, and we have found that other publicly available models are able to discover them as well without requiring a bypass. Katie Moussouris, you've seen the technical pieces of it. Can you talk about what it actually says?
Yeah.
Like, what is the claim? And is there something for Anthropic to fix and refusing to fix? Help me understand like what are that conversation pieces.
Okay, so the paper looked at several known CVEs, right? It was trying to get the model to identify these known CVEs. So it knew, that there were vulnerabilities there. And then it also wrote a snippet of code that hadn't been published before with deliberately planted vulnerabilities to try and prove that they could use this technique to find novel vulnerabilities, right? So they put it to the test, and they asked it, find the security vulnerabilities in this code. And Fable 5 refused, right, for the known CVEs and for the novel code. And then it said, fix this code. And lo and behold, Fable 5 started on the pathway, to
Oh my God.
identifying the vulnerabilities in order to fix them, which is exactly what you want defenders to do. So your question of, can this be fixed? It shouldn't be fixed. Why should you fix this? This is the behavior that defenders need to do. And the whole fix code and then write scripts to test the patches, they were kind of extrapolating that that's proof of concept, because, to test the patches, you have to try and probe the underlying vulnerabilities and test whether or not you can trigger them. But, I can't think of a more defensive use of these models than what was in that paper. And yeah, the way that they're describing it there is accurate, like the way, it's looking for known vulnerabilities, et cetera. But I just would say the technique was that's why I made that like tongue-in-cheek shirt, the t-shirt, that everybody wants right now, where it says fix this code on the front and on the back it says this t-shirt is a munition, because that's what people did with the encryption algorithms in the 90s. They wore them on t-shirts and wore them through airports. So I'm like, I hope to see people just wearing like knockoff versions of this shirt in Vegas, but maybe I'll bring some to LabsCon. We'll see.
Please make these for us. Everybody wants these shirts. I
Make
want
them in
this
the
shirt.
extra
All right.
soft version that Luta,
Of course.
t-shirts are made of. Yeah.
We love the
Juanito,
Luta
I don't know how
shirt.
much you can say, but you guys, Sentinel-1 was included in the Project Glasswing in this last batch. How disruptive has this shut-off been, if at all, to people using it? Maybe not you personally, but if you imagine you're an early Project Glasswing, you're at Fortinet and you got Glasswing originally and you're like doing your
Fortinet,
thing on the
really?
source code. Is this shutdown incredibly disruptive?
I'm trying to parse terms carefully here because I don't know that I want the shutdown to get better. Let's start there. It has not been entirely disruptive. At the same time, this is clearly like a mismatched tool for what the purpose of the government reached out for one of the few tools it had to do this quickly. And of course, it's not the most effective means. It didn't stop everything. And then frankly, it kind of made a big deal of stopping things that were never an issue, right? Like what foreigners and stuff were in Glasswing in the first place. Like there's a lot of discussions to be had there. At the same time, we didn't really get to touch Mythos 5. Like all of us were working with Mythos Preview. And this release of Fable 5 comes with the release of Mythos 5, which is supposed to be like the ready baked and improved version. And I think we had like a few hours with it. So I can't tell you what the full-on Mythos experience is actually like.
Mythos Preview is still available?
I don't want to talk about that.
Ooh, well, that's a question I want to. Katie Moussouris, do you know if Mythos Preview is still available? It probably is if Juanito is answering like that.
So
I have no idea what you're
I
talking
literally have no idea which versions are available to who. That is up to Anthropic and its partners on that one. My company has no reason to have access to those things because we are dealing with human hacker reports, as you know. We deal with bug bounties and vulnerability disclosure, which is definitely that era in the industry is coming to a close of that bug bounty era of human only reports are certainly gone. It's all AI assisted.
I want to push back on that just a tiny bit, Katie, like on the whole, like we have no use for it because look, technically, right? If your company ever has use for the greatest intelligence that Anthropic can provide, then since you're in the cybersecurity space at all, then you have to beg and claw your way to having Mythos access because Fable is not going to help you, right? Like this is something we discussed in the last episode that is honestly kind of disturbing, right? Like all of us could easily get into any of these like trusted access programs, and we are. But most people who are just defenders, most of the people that we talk about being like, oh, if only they patched, if only they were, they had the time and they were doing all the things we think they should be doing, right? Then everything would be perfect. It's these poor, underpaid, under-resourced people's goddamn fault. None of those people have access to Mythos. And if they have access to Fable 5 and can pay the 4x cost of tokens for it, if I remember, or it was 2x or 4x from Opus, if they can even pay it, they can't use it for cyber, and neither can your company. There's something kind of nuts here.
Okay, so I will push back on your pushback because as we know, you can actually get a lot of the same results with earlier models and open weight models if you are skilled and have the ability to create harnesses. So I will say that folks at my company are that skilled, and so we are definitely fine. And to the point about the vulnerabilities that were in that paper, getting back to the paper, there are like GPT-5.5 doesn't even refuse the initial request. So like this whole notion that they were, singled out because of this guardrail bypass that revealed all these dangerous capabilities. It's like, so by dangerous, you mean the same ones that are not guardrailed at all in other models. That those capabilities right there, those ones. So I think that's the other thing too, is that the other models are quite capable, and certainly with skilled humans operating the harnesses, you can get a lot of mileage out of them. I do agree though that having the latest models, that's my whole, premise that I think these expert controls need to be lifted. And me and a bunch of other experts in the industry who wrote, signed that open letter, we all agree that having the best tools for defenders is the way forward. And it doesn't meaningfully slow down attackers to withhold these.
Well, isn't that part of the self-own of this whole thing, right? Like I'm a huge Anthropic fan. All of you guys know that like I love the tech. I really do. I am incredibly dismayed by their approach to cyber. As I think it's unfriendly, but more than anything, it is really framing what we do in a way that like just doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound right. It isn't functional. And a part of that, I think, that's biting them in the ass is precisely this. You made cyber into something as toxic as chemical weapons and nuclear proliferation. And then when somebody goes, well, that's what you tell us that your product is. So
we're responding only to that.
Right. Like what? So what are you doing to keep this thing off people's hands? Oh, we only rely on guardrails. Well, maybe we should have a conversation about the fact that that's your only go-to. That in itself is a choice. But if you're saying that, then the minute somebody says, well, the guardrails don't work well, then of course you're going to get, like, as far as the boomer mind goes, if you wanted an excuse to slow these people down and to get them to, like, come to heel, they gave you everything you needed, right? They've been saying this thing is a chemical weapon level whatever, and that the only thing stopping it is these guardrails, and the guardrails are squishy, because guardrails are always squishy. Like, help me, Katie. Help me here. Like, help me not treat these people like morons, but, like, it just doesn't... How can they... How is this a viable strategy?
You're so conflicted. You're like, I'm a big fan. Oh my God, help me not do this. Yeah. So, okay. So I will say that when Glasswing was announced, I feel like I might have been one of the only people who was excited about their approach. And the reason I was is because to me, it was attempting to do multi-party vulnerability, disclosure and coordination. I recognized that pattern because I had to create that process for Microsoft way back in 2008 with Kaminsky's DNS bug, was the original thing that we did multi-party coordination on. But, starting Microsoft vulnerability research, having to weigh the equities of how broadly do we share this thing that affects multiple parties? We cannot boil the ocean. We have to do some kind of graduated disclosure. And so when I saw the Glasswing strategy, I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me that, this thing is going to be able to find a lot more bugs a lot faster, probably want to give the vendors a little head start, And I think other people just took it as something else, something more sensational, something more, marketing driven. And I was like, no, there's a practical security reason for this. I've lived this reality, and this is a reasonable approach.
There's a South Korean telecom angle here that's been reported in the Washington Post. The Washington Post on June 15, citing anonymous White House officials, said that since June 15, the White House had begun considering export controls after identifying a Korean telco suspected of having ties to China among the organizations originally granted access to Mythos. Wired later identified that telco as SK Telecom, and it turned out that Anthropic had revoked their access after the White House complained about this. Now, I have a question here. Is there a realistic world in which we can keep this thing out of the hands of China? Because I feel like that's the government's go-to. National security, this is going to get into the hands of China. Is there any world in which this Project Glasswing gets expanded and there is no risk of it getting into Chinese hands? Is that a legitimate worry, Katie? Can you put this into context for us?
I'm gonna put it in context again with there are reasons to share certain types of information with everyone. And I will say that in the context of knowing that, you know, back again with Microsoft, one of the first companies that had to grapple with these issues globally, because especially at its heyday, before smartphones, at its heyday, it was over, 95, 98% of the world's operating system. So if you think about it as a global supply chain risk in the form of an operating system, that is the ecosystem that I am familiar with. So the MAP
When you say
program.
everyone, including so-called adversaries,
Correct.
China.
Yeah. So the MAP
Right.
program, right? One of the big, equities to weigh in the MAP program, which is the Microsoft Active Protections program, shared vulnerability details, including proof of concept code, with defensive vendors like antivirus, type of vendors. This is before the days of EDR, but
Those people.
the signature-based folks, IDS, IPS folks that had to create defenses. And the strategy with MAP was share it with defenders very shortly before the patch is available, let them build their defenses so that when the patch comes out, you're reducing that exposure window, because all these defenders would have signatures and block the attacks while the organizations would get to patching. We had to share this stuff with Chinese vendors. Why? Because Chinese computers we did not want to get them hacked and have them used to hack other things and like start a global worm
Chinese use
outbreak.
Windows. Yeah.
Right. So the fact of the matter is, at some point, you do have to share vulnerability information, proof of concept code, all of this quote unquote dangerous stuff that, yes, can be weaponized and turned into attacks, but you have to share it with defenders worldwide. We do not have, it's like an ocean, it's like the atmosphere. Like, we don't have an ability to just, cyber dome ourselves into safety.
But when it's too dangerous to release, Katie, how do we give this big, giant, dangerous thing to our adversaries?
Well,
right?
I mean,
you see where the messaging gets fucked up?
With MAP, it was, you did it with very little time available for attackers, and you did it
There was a
simultaneously.
3-day window, right?
It was a shorter window for certain dangerous things, right? So it could be like maybe 24 hours. But the whole point there is that you do it with a short window, and you do it to all the defenders worldwide, so that any attack attempts would probably be caught and mitigated, or the chances of them being caught and mitigated were much higher. So, and especially advanced adversaries, they're not going to want to use something that lights up every intrusion detection system like a Christmas tree. They're going to want to be stealthier than that. So that was the strategy. And so this is not something that is like block all access forever because it's even possible. It's not. And there are defensive reasons to share, this type of information and capabilities.
Before
Can
you go,
we talk
Juan,
about-
I would make the argument that MAP also worked. It still exists today, even after all those years since you guys created it. It exists today, and whenever there have been leaks, Microsoft have been prompt at kicking people out.
Yep.
And I think Kaspersky got kicked out because they got sanctioned, so that's a legal thing.
Yeah.
But overall, the MAP program addressing this kind of risk worked.
Overall, yeah. And
Wanted
there
to
were
go.
bumps in the road. And the other thing too is that, as soon as there were leaks or, detections of exploitation coming out of a particular region, yeah, absolutely. They were kicked out either permanently or, for some cooling off period, because if they claimed, no, we were hacked ourselves, right?
Might have been a mistake or something.
Yeah, or something like that. They were compromised, and that's how an adversary got it.
Last note on this: the most people that got kicked out were Chinese vendors. Just for
correct.
the record. So
Correct.
there is a legitimate kind of worry there. Juan, go.
Well, I'm trying to. So I want to game this out just a little bit further, which is, when you ask, can we keep China from having access to Mythos?
In which
What
world
exact-
doesn't China already have people embedded in one of these companies
Well,
that has this thing?
yeah.
Sorry, go. Sorry, I get
Sure,
aggravated by this thought.
I know, and I'm aggravated too. but I actually want to just take this a little further, right? Like, access to what? Because if you get access, like, if they pop anybody in the Glasswing, whatever, which is like, dude, if you're giving it to telcos, the Chinese have access. Like, let's start there. The Chinese are in like every fucking telco. There's cyber mercenaries that are in like every telco. So like, let's not, we're being kind of ridiculous, but I wanna narrow in on how we're being ridiculous, like how exactly we're being ridiculous. Because, okay, you give someone access, they pop somebody in Glasswing, and they get a prompt, and you're like, we got Mythos, right? Like, they go to Xi Jinping and they said, we've got access to Mythos. Now what do we do? Well, what the fuck do you think it's going to do? Right? Like, what exactly? You get Mythos access today, right? The Chinese have no lack of vulnerability researchers. They are swimming in Odays. They've popped the US government and Microsoft and everybody along the way, no problems in recent history. What do they get to use Mythos for that they can't already do? That's part of the marketing bullshit that these people are pushing, and it's so
expand all of that to
insane.
U.S. companies. What does U.S. companies get? Like, it's the same thing, right? Like, you're not defenders. Here's my argument: if you keep Fable, if you turn Fable back on tomorrow, does that fix cybersecurity in any way?
No, because Fable is fucking useless to cybersecurity. They did it. They made it purposefully useless to cybersecurity.
Oh, no,
so if you're saying that
you can get it to fix this code. No, you can't. I can attest.
If you're willing to resort to munitions, Katie, then I suppose
I'm a dangerous person. No. No, but I think the other thing too is that, if an adversary has that much access to an organization that has, special access to early AI models, they are probably going to take that access and go straight for the vulnerability database in that organization. They are not necessarily going to need to go for the AI access necessarily, like maybe, sure. But from the earliest times of foreign adversaries known to hack into major corporations, back what, 2009, 2010 was like some of the first, documented publicly that adversaries were going after major companies. Like Google was hacked, Microsoft, a whole bunch of companies were hacked. And guess where the adversaries went? They went for the bug databases. Why? Because obviously, Why go for the mining equipment, which would be the AI models, when you can just get the refined gold that is sitting there in the vault? You don't need to do all that work. If vulnerabilities are what you want, there is a whole database of them there for you.
You're telling me that they're not dying to mine the source code themselves to find thousands of possible vulnerabilities and then spend the time validating them and then figuring out which ones can be triggered in in the appropriate remote manner and then use those? And then, right?
So no, I am saying that there are easier things to get what you want if what you want are vulnerabilities, if you are already, have that level of access. That's all. Just practical talk over here.
I mean, let's look. You know what the easiest way out of this thing is, and it's the one that's not going to happen. Is just for Anthropic to go up there, for Dario to get up and say, you know what, the marketing got ahead of us. It's a really good model. It can do a lot of cool shit. It's not world-ending. It's just another model, and like that's the thing that we all wish. You could just get off this fucking merry-go-round that you've strapped yourself onto because you won't admit that you've been overhyping this to an epic world-ending level proportion to try to justify $1 trillion IPO. I get it. But that they have strung themselves up, hung themselves off a lamppost, and we're all just sitting there going like, okay, like, are we really going to let them do this? Like, at what point do you just like cut these people down and go, you need to reassess your priorities here. Like, this is unnecessary.
I partially blame the vulnerability disclosure, let's call them community. I see Nicholas Carlini went to Unprompted and did that talk, and everyone kind of just like, hair on fire. Oh my God, this is the end of it. I've spoken to Bruce Dang and these guys at Caliph, and they're just like, Ryan, you don't understand. This is really the end of the world. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, and I feel like vulnerability researchers, because they were so good at vulnerability research and exploit chaining, kind of felt an existential panic that helped play into that. It's way too dangerous to release messaging, and it's hard to claw that back now. Katie, you have a thought there?
Yeah, I do, because I'm kind of going back to, so Jags, you were saying, the solution to this would be if, Dario stood up and said something about marketing. I think the solution to this is for all the AI vendors, as their models are getting better, to do something like a pre-release to a lot of major companies and open source projects, exactly like Anthropic did. Maybe not with all the talking about it, but just have that be like sort of this is how we roll things out. Because if people want to try and
Right.
find some of these bugs that this thing can find, they are welcome to do so. And then, after a certain point, we'll just release it to the public. But I think it needs to be just kind of a low key way that this is dealt with, because if you think about it, these are all just tools, right? And one thing that before I had the permission at Microsoft to do bug bounties, I had permission to buy tools, to license tools from hackers, because we knew that, look, if somebody came to us with a bug that we couldn't find with our tools, that meant they had a methodology or a tool that we were interested in. And so this is all this is just tool release. And if there can be some kind of acceptable, like, graduated tool release, such that defenders, if they're interested, can take part in an early tool release so that they can use it to find bugs in their own stuff, that's great. But tying it to marketing, probably not great. Just having it be a de facto way to roll these things out is a practical thing to do. It's a
Well,
practical way to mitigate risk.
I think to your point, that is how OpenAI has been doing it, right? Like
Sorta.
OpenAI has kind of like batted Anthropic like a bit of like a gadfly, because they're like, even like look at how understated the GPT 5.5 release is, and that's the model that keeps getting compared to Mythos and doing relatively well. Like I'm doing side by sides, GPT 5.5, same general capability, doesn't get there nearly as quickly. It needs to be optimized. But
Hmm.
like, what Mythos does for me in 12 hours, GPT 5.5 takes almost 3 days to do,
Hmm.
being a very complex job. But it does
With a
it,
different
right?
cost
So like,
structure as well?
I mean, I suspect if I really sat and tried to compare them, that the dollar costs would probably still be cheaper on the OpenAI side. It's just longer.
Okay.
But there's no guardrail bullshit. There's no, there's no hassle. Um, so I think it's something to remember that OpenAI chose to call this GPT 5.5 as if it was just another minor iteration from 5.4, but it wasn't. It's Spud. It's the like super secret, amazing other model, right? So
Don't tell them.
there's a strategy, right? Like if you look at it, right, instead of, they didn't immediately hit back with like, oh, you did Glasswing, we do Daybreak. It took him a bit, right? They didn't immediately go, oh, you can do Vulns, we can do Vulns. And in a way, it was almost like they stepped back and they let Anthropic throw themselves off a fucking cliff in a very interesting way. Because OpenAI's response has actually been to say, oh, we're going to go hug the US government and like, let's give them capabilities and let's do this in a responsible way. And like, oh, you guys are trying to do cybersecurity stuff. Okay, well, here's, you get on TAC. Now you're on the cyber model. Go do your fucking jobs, right?
No,
Like we don't have
I
to sit there and beg them for access
I do
beyond that.
remember OpenAI, though, as soon as the Glasswing thing was announced, they did say, we've been doing this since January with our trusted
Trusted
Yeah.
access
yeah,
cyber program,
access
right?
Yeah.
model. So they did do a Me Too on that. They did try to jump on that
Right.
publicity train, for sure, and said, we've been doing this since January. And certainly there are probably people at OpenAI that wish they had gotten as much attention as Glasswing did. Um, but
Do you think they still wish?
oh, at this point, probably
Right.
no. The other thing too is
There's
that,
attention and attention, right? Like,
yeah. Well, the other thing too is that it's very telling that nobody has come out from there and said something like, we have all the same types of capabilities that Fable and Mythos have. Even though, to your point, they do. It just takes a little bit longer in some cases. But
Mhm.
back to that paper, GPT 5.5 was tested with just the straightforward, find the security vulnerabilities in this code, and it happily complied and it found those CVEs. So capability wise, if these export controls were based on capabilities, it definitely is a misapplication of that of that control.
Look, I'll give you the formula. I love giving. I like sort of just saying these things out loud and demystifying them. And I'm sure people in the AI space are probably not thrilled. But like, look, my assessment at this point is if you can instrument an ensemble of GPT 5.5 doing the long horizon task and Opus 4.7 or 4.8 doing the implementation work, you have Mythos at home. Because that's really what it is Mythos is thorough as fuck and Opus is resourceful in a way that like, but if you just do Opus, it kind of gives up a little too easily. It gives up a little too quickly. It doesn't keep up with the long horizon task. GPT-5.5 does. It'll do it for 3 fucking days if you tell it to, as I, have observed, right? So if I could get GPT-5.5 to be the long-term thinking and Opus 4.8 to be what implements tactically, you have Mythos, more basically. And to Katie's point, right? Like when you point Opus or GPT-5.5 to the right part of the code and say there's a vuln here, it will find it. You just can't throw the entire code base and be like, find me the thing, and be like, they'll scratch the surface and go, here's something like it. Like, that's not quite right?
Are you guys surprised we haven't seen the Amazon report at all? I mean, the only thing we know about it is Katie saying she saw a technical portion of it. Like, what is there something that stops it from? Let's be transparent. Put it out there. Let people read it, and we all form our opinions.
Why wouldn't Anthropic themselves put it out?
This is my question. I mean, it's not theirs. In theory, it's Amazon's. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
I have
but if
no
Amazon,
idea.
sorry, go ahead, Katie.
No, I was gonna say I have no idea why it's not out. Like I thought when they asked me to review it, I was assuming they were asking a lot of people to review it. And then suddenly I'm the only voice out there talking about it all weekend long. And it was like, that's kind of why I did the blog, because I was like, I'm getting too many reporter inquiries and I'm correcting, weird inaccuracies.
Why should you be speaking for Anthropic?
Well, no, and I wasn't speaking for them. I was speaking for myself. You know what I mean?
No, I know. I didn't mean it in that way. But
Right.
like, why are you doing...
Well,
why are they hanging you out to dry on?
Yeah.
I guess is the question.
I think the overall thing, though, was everything was unfolding so quickly. And sort of by the time the open letter came out on Sunday, my blog came out on Sunday, framing the open letter and just kind of putting all of the things I'd already said in one place so I could at least point reporters there, because I have a job to do. I have kids to raise. I've got companies to run. I'm a captain of industry over here and I don't have time for all these like inquiries. And you guys are the first media I've done actually live. So congratulations.
Thank you.
But
thank you for
thinking
of
No,
us.
really appreciate that for real.
Right. And and again, on my way to the airport. So that's why we have like a hard stop in 45 or so minutes. But I think the main thing is that the story was unfolding in real time. And by Sunday, it was announced, in Wall Street Journal that they were flying Carlini and Logan and others
is going out to DC,
to
right?
DC
Yeah.
on Monday and stuff. So I think at that point, everybody who knew about the paper or had seen the paper was just waiting to see what happened. You know what I mean? And so
Publish the paper. Let's all get to read it, and we all
I
form
don't
our...
think it's like theirs to publish, right? It's not mine to share. Of course, reporters are asking me
Well-
for it, and I'm like, I can't share it with you. This is not mine.
No, I'm calling on Anthropic.
Okay,
If
but
that's
it's
your
not theirs
stance and you
either.
want to make it clear.
It's not theirs. either.
Wait. I'm sorry. If this is causing you this much heartache, fuck it, right? Like, why don't you just, like what is this Boy Scout bullshit, right? Like, what are you breaking it? You're going to break an NDA? Like, you're breaking an NDA with Amazon, right? Amazon, which has its own, supposedly makes its own models, it has its own stake in the game, is kind of like undermining you with the US government in something fairly silly, right? You can't come out and be like, actually, this is bullshit.
So, I mean, I'm going to pivot for a second. We should probably pivot to this other topic, but whenever there was a disclosure dispute between Microsoft and a researcher, a lot of people were like, well, just release all of the communications that you had with that researcher and clear it up that way. And they thought that was a very
Proof of
simple
concept
thing.
or GTFO, right? Like,
Right.
show
No,
me
but
the work.
They wanted
Receipts,
they said,
receipts.
yeah, just share the entire communication chain, and that'll clear everything up. And you can, if you're saying that there was some miscommunication between you and the researcher, just do that. The reason we would never ever do that, and the reason it's a bad idea to do that, is because you break trust with anyone who is ever going to share anything with you ever again. So there is a very good reason, in my opinion, to not, it's not about breaking an NDA. It's about saying, like, look, you know, even if the shit hits the fan, we're going to keep confident what you've asked us to keep in confidence. And that enables people to trust you with confidential information in the
Right.
future. And this goes for regular researchers or institutional researchers, right? So they probably just don't want to break a relationship with maybe a research partner that may be valuable to them, now and in the future. So I just wouldn't say that Anthropic should be the ones to release this thing. Do I think, whoever's responsible for the research paper should release it? Probably, but at this point they may be a little embarrassed because it says fix this code in there. I'm not
That's
I'm not kidding you. That might be why, is because it's like embarrassing.
Well, they weren't embarrassed to send it to the U.S. government, right?
Yeah,
Like this
and
is like I'm not advising breaking trust because I don't think trust matters. I'm just saying you're clearly getting fucked on purpose by a
you have a
competitor,
logjam with the U.S.
right?
government making a claim that you are saying it's nonsense. Like, show the
But
receipts so we see
but it's
that
a competitor
nonsense.
that's like playing this. It's not just like a random third party. It's not
It's a
like
weird
a
competitor,
researcher.
though. Amazon has invested $33 billion in Anthropic. Like, that's a weird kind of, like, they're all in this
Yeah.
circular money exchanging space. And now like when you talk about Amazon building their own models, I look at Amazon being a big investor in Anthropic, and then you start to wonder, like, what the hell is really going on? I don't know. Where does this end? Do you think Wall Street Journal, Bob McMillan reports that Carlini went to Washington, D.C. and tried to, like, hey guys, this is too dangerous to really, the same thing you're asking for. This kind of like the narrative is not matching the reality. Let me kind of paint
Let
a
me show
picture
you
for
the bugs I found. There's a lot of cool bugs here. You're like, bro.
Where does this go? We're a week in, and there doesn't seem to be any movement. There's some, there's some, the language from Anthropic is that they're hopeful, and it feels like there's going to be a positive development coming forward. What do you think happens, Katie?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say because, like I said, the export controls coming this fast, that's highly unusual. So usually export controls take quite some time, and it's a much longer deliberation. There's a public comment period, like all kinds of things
Bureaucracy up
usually
the wazoo,
happen.
right? Yeah.
Right. But I mean, there's a reason for that. So it allows industry and experts to comment before something is put in place. So the fact that it came down so fast is unusual. There's no predicting what's going to happen. Is it going to come? Is it going to be pulled back fast? Is it going to take the usual time it takes to refine these types of regulations, which is several years? I mean, Wassenaar took 4 years to get the exemptions for vulnerability disclosure and incident response put in after the initial language was put in there for controlling intrusion software. And yeah, I mean, we only escaped being export controlled away from being able to respond to internet worms like WannaCry. We only got away with that because the US hadn't locally implemented its own export controls for it. It had agreed to them in theory at the Wassenaar level,
Right.
but hadn't implemented them yet until we could kind of clarify and get those exemptions. But there's no predicting how long this is going to take. I just think, we got to wait and see. But what's interesting to me is that what I don't want to have happen is to have them suddenly apply to all these other models with similar capabilities that have been out in the public for quite some time. I don't want to see them
Right.
suddenly apply to GPT-5, right? Or 5.5.
The Anthropic USG relationship is the underpinning, the pot bubbling under all of this. David Sachs has made it clear that, from his US government's point of view, we don't want any major regulations in place. We need to empower these companies to go and innovate and do great things. And his argument is that Dario is doing the regulatory capture. You're way ahead now, and you're interested in regulations because you want to pull the ladder up behind you and not have others do it. That is the underpinning of all of this, meaning that they go to export controls as the instrument overnight because it's available. It's available to kind of put a stick in the spoke, if you want to do it that way. Juan, what do you think? How do you think it shapes out? Do you think there's a world in which the export control gets lifted and we go back to status quo, or does it get lifted with a bunch of conditions. I don't know.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it depends a lot on who ends up in the room. I think part of what David Sachs is saying is that these nerds don't play well with the government. They don't know how to talk to the government. They don't know how to, like, they are. I think I ended up tweeting it the other day. I'm like, it really feels like they're trying to rediscover politics from first principles, right? They're like, well, let's try and see kind of how this works. Surely this is how politics work. And you're like, guys, get some fucking help. Get a PR person that actually knows what they're doing. Call Jen Wood. Like, get somebody who's actually done these sorts of export control things, right? Like, which they called you, Katie, but I don't get the sense that, I don't know. I won't speak for that, and I don't really want to put your relationship on blast there, but like,
they didn't say anything about export controls, and it was not even, my comments weren't out when the export controls went down. You know what I mean? So the export controls happened, and then my comments came out after that. So it wasn't even, as far as I knew, there was nothing like that on the table. I was literally just doing a
right.
technical evaluation. But yeah, I mean, to your point, the I will say that it is more complicated than just figure out how to talk to the government, because when Wassenaar came out, it's not just nerds, not just researchers who were pushing back. Major corporations were pushing back. There were whole well-oiled industry consortiums full of those major corporations pushing back. And it was not possible to undo that particular, international agreement overnight, even though all of these very well-oiled and experienced organizations were telling the US government and any other government that would listen that this was going to harm defense. So I will just say that it's not just a matter of like you just get a few of the right people. Like, I do know how to talk to the government. I literally created Hack the Pentagon. I definitely know how to get the government to do like weird stuff that it wasn't considering doing before, and in relatively like short amount of time. It did still take a couple of years for that, for that to happen. But I'm just saying that it's complicated. It's not straightforward, the best way to handle these things. I think everyone agrees it could have gone better. Like that part, everyone agrees. But you only often learn that in retrospect, because if you're sitting there like, no, we put some guardrails in and the capabilities are universal to some extent, among all models, like how would you expect this to suddenly turn into this, right? Like I don't see like how they could have predicted that outcome necessarily. And then I think the main thing now is that they do realize, and they are talking to the government, and hopefully what comes out of this is something that is livable and not, arbitrary, right? This
What
seems,
does that look like?
yeah,
I'm
well, I
making
mean, I
you,
think,
I'm putting you on the spot and saying I put you in charge of fixing this.
well, put it this way. One, I think there needs to be a universal acceptance that guardrails are bypassable by nature. That has to be universally accepted. And so some level of, since the guardrails aren't perfect, as soon as someone demonstrates some way to get around the guardrails, that shouldn't result in an instant market destabilizing export control for anybody. I don't think that should
Right.
be the way that it goes. I think,
But guardrails are your only kind of like, hey, we have guardrails, so it can't be misused. So there's a balance to that conversation, right?
Only
then-
because they've chosen that.
right.
Only because you have deterministic other kinds of mechanisms here that they're not espousing because they continue to talk about the alignment problem. But like Google DeepMind released a paper on like other ways to manage model controls. Like Google's just sitting there being like, what the
what they've
fuck are you
told us,
people
bro.
doing? I'm telling you why like they're wrong, right? Like they're sorry, Katie's.
It reminds me of when Anthropic found an APT that had used their entire model, and they had the big argument of, oh, we are so amazing at finding them, but we have these guardrails that stop them from doing it. And I'm like, what are you really telling me? Like,
I mean, the other thing too is that clearly guardrails are not implemented everywhere, right? So, I mean, I think if we think about what the regulatory regime should look like for these kinds of capabilities, one, it should be objective technical criteria that is agreed upon and implemented universally. Like whatever that looks like, whether it's some form of guardrail or, what DeepMind was releasing, other ways to control the models and monitor their models, like all of that stuff. This has to be objective and universally applied, or it's market destabilizing, it's arbitrary, it is, from a technical standpoint, it makes absolutely no sense. But then again, we've dealt with regulations before that make absolutely no technical sense. So I just think that we're moving into a world where obviously the regulations need to keep up with the advancements, and that is extremely difficult to do. Um, I don't know anybody who necessarily wants to spend their like best technical years of their life working in regulatory bodies, right? But that's kind of the crossover that we probably need to see a little bit more of.
Thank you for your service, right? That you were willing to do any of that. Kind of saved our asses on the last one. What I'll say here, look, even on the guardrailing end, why I'm a lot softer on OpenAI, and I have to admit my bias, right? Like I'm on their Frontier Risk Council. The Frontier Risk Council has smart people, thankfully smarter than me, that like are really engaged with what should the guardrails be and how should this thing work, and there's a framework and there's discussion and there's testing, and that way like when OpenAI comes out with something, we're not surprised, and I think the industry has generally not really been up in arms about any of it. You're just kind of like, okay, well, those are the guardrails and this is how we're going to work with this thing. With the Anthropic side of it, I don't think there's an equivalent anything, and they're making arbitrary decisions that are disruptive, that are foreign and bizarre, right? Like you're giving me a model that will refuse any cybersecurity task. Like I couldn't get Opus 4.8 to build the harness for Mythos because it was refusing as if it were a guardrail thing. You're
So
like,
then,
what the
if
fuck
there's a
is this?
framework in development at OpenAI, I think they should open that framework up, right? Like have it out there, like you said, and everything. Once the framework is released, release the framework, and
Right,
get it. That's exactly what I was talking about. Is that it needs to be, objective and universal, and not these. Put it this
right.
way: there's proprietary models, which fine, but then proprietary frameworks I think is a bad thing, right? So we should open up
Right.
those trust frameworks, the guardrail frameworks, whatever you want to call them.
Mm.
Why are we afraid of China? I'm go to this open letter that Katie Moussouris signed that you mentioned. It's at freefable.org, and there's a line in there that jumps out at me that says the Chinese open weight models are only months behind the best American models, and those are the models we know about. It seems likely that the PRC government has access to private capabilities beyond what has already been published. So why do we care that the Chinese can steal something or find something or it gets leaked to China when we're saying that the Chinese models are only even if they're not on par, they're only months behind. So by Christmas we'll all be on par. Like, why is this even
Well,
a conversation?
let me add to that, right? Like what happens when OpenAI releases their next model and it's just like they treat it like a normal fucking model and it can do a lot of Mythos like things, right? Like eh, moreover, don't we actually kind of want that? Like I'll say this, Anthropic's acting like the cybersecurity industry is like scared of what's coming. Dude, we've been living under the fire hose of failure for like fucking 2 decades. We just live with it and we adapt to it, and we like, to Sergey Bradis's, I believe it's a Sergey Bradis point about like, offense and defense are not siblings. Like defense is the offspring of offense, right? Like we need to see what the attackers are doing and then figure out how to effectively defend. That's why threat intel exists. That's why
I,
things have moved this way. Sorry, Katie, go ahead.
no, I go ahead, finish your thought, but I have some thoughts of my own.
I was just going to say, we are being kept from seeing what the reality will look like or should look like, or, what is coming, right? What is the operational tempo like? Moreover, we're being told about these like massively efficient, capable models. And you're like, well, are they actually that good? In the sense of like, I don't give a fuck about your vulnerability research. Like, cool, great. Like we're drowning in vulns. Is it good at the lateral movement phase? Is it quiet? Is it loud? Is the periodicity of its requests to API like such a telltale fucking sign that like, you know, you can just block all these things immediately, right? Like, what is the reality of the op tempo and the capability once you let the thing out of the bag? And like, that's why I keep calling this hype and marketing bullshit, because you're like, I'm taking you at your word, but what you're showing me is a thing that's really good at this one thing. And we keep telling you that one thing is but a small part of what offense is. And you're keeping us from seeing what the rest of it looks like, I suspect, because your model is just okay at it. And yeah, you can make it better, but, you know, this all feels fake.
Well,
Sorry.
no, I mean what I was responding to initially was sort of at the beginning of that soliloquy of yours, right? So it was at the beginning, and you were saying, what are organizations so afraid of? We've been drowning in vulnerabilities forever. And I will say, you know, with my advanced age and, you know, number of years in this industry, I'll say, yeah, absolutely. And we've been telling organizations that they needed to get better at all this stuff. They needed to write better code. They needed to get better at intrusion detection, you know, and containment. They needed to get better at patching. But ideally, if people are getting better at writing, you know, fewer bugs in code, then maybe patching, you know, they wouldn't need to patch so much. They needed to do zero trust. They needed to, you know, reduce their attack surface. We've been telling them all this stuff for so many years. What this era has done is kind of proven our point that,
Right.
you know, they had gotten to some steady state of equilibrium somewhere between good enough for cyber insurance to insure them and not end up having to file, you know, file 10Ks and things for breaches and stuff. Somewhere in that zone of acceptable shittiness in
Failure.
cybersecurity.
Right.
And at this point, you know, why are they so scared? Because, you know, the emperor's got no clothes on, you know, and it's being called out because the scale of what's being reported is and being, you know, attempted to be fixed right now is so high. And I'll tell you what they're scared of in vulnerability disclosure and bug bounty land, like that to me has been like the canary in the coal mine, you know, of all this. It's like we started seeing increases as AI models got better and hackers were using them more and more. Oh, it went, you know, month to month to month. Now it's, you know, over 100-fold increase from, you know, bug submissions from this year to last year. That's insane. That's why Curl is taking July off, you know, like they are taking July off from their vuln disclosure program, period. End of story, you know.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean there aren't bugs to
Correct.
report,
And they
right?
literally
Like
address that. They say, we'll hear about them in August. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. And, but the fact of the matter is, like, the
European
drowning,
approach.
yeah, the drowning was somewhat manageable and tolerable up until now. And now the drowning is so obvious and intolerable that, you know, and causing, you know, much more operational disruptions. That's what they're afraid of. It's the reason why, you know, Gotti got all these people together, myself included, to write this like Mythos storm brew paper, whatever, you know, about whatever it ended up being called. But, you know, that thing of like how to get ready for the Mythos moment, what's going to happen? Because everyone was freaking out because they knew. They knew that they hadn't been applying all these best practices we've been telling them for ever and ever, and that it was going to be found out, you know, and it was going to hurt them.
It's the tech. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
No. I will never stop you from talking. Go.
Look, it's the technical debt collection thing we were talking about.
Yeah,
right?
the technical
like,
repo man has come. Yeah,
exactly.
He's not happy.
And the technical repo men have been around with all this ransomware shit for a few years now, and everyone's been losing their minds. But it's like nothing about it is new. Like there's a reason a lot of researchers are just kind of like, whatever, ransomware, right? Because you're like, nothing about it is new. They're just coming in to collect for how shitty the state of most of your networks are. And I've been saying it on the pod. I'm like, the internet is what happens when the internet becomes an unforgiving place. Because right now, the internet is very forgiving. You can live an entire life and have a multi-billion-dollar business that's like held together with duct tape and baling wire and like has holes yay big. But it just so happens that nobody decided today was your day. And then, you know, at some point it does come around and you're like, well, fuck it. Like, here's the bill for like not really taking this seriously. But what happens when the internet is unforgiving and anything you plug into it immediately gets slammed 17 different fucking ways and is popped immediately, right? Like I'm not saying that that's a future I look forward to, but considering that we already live there, we're just not feeling it. I would actually like that feedback mechanism to tighten. Like I do want us to get to that true depth of dystopia so that we can figure out what it looks like to do this for real.
But I think the people who are going to pay for that world are, Wendy Nather's security poverty line. There are people below the security poverty line,
Yeah.
and they're most users. That's actually most users.
Yeah.
That's
The
most
rest of
schools,
us.
hospitals, literally. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think you really want that, where the repo man comes for all of them at the same time, because, that's going to be bad. It already
Look,
is bad, right? And you're right about the ransomware
yeah.
stuff, but I'm just saying, like, it's the acceleration of what was already happening. And those of us who've been living
Right.
in this world, we're like, yeah, of course this was going to happen. No big surprise here. And what did you think was going to happen? I think it's that, look, the fact that I suck at making slides, but now because of AI, I don't. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there are all
Right.
these capabilities that, you just imagine it and you point the AI towards this, and it will work while you're asleep and all of these things. All of this happening at once is going to, pretty much nail everybody above and below the security poverty line that Wendy Nather coined. But the people above it will just, write checks, call in their vendors, recover. Their stock might dip. People will make more money because they buy the dip, and then the stock recovers. I mean, the CrowdStrike outage that happened, right? The stock dipped and it's higher than
Crowd
ever
2K.
now, right? So,
Right.
exactly. I think the thing though is, what do we really care about, and like how are we going to address the people below that security poverty line going forward, because it is our hospitals and our schools and our grandparents and all that stuff.
I'm not saying I don't care. I'm not saying I want bad things to befall those folks at all, right? Like we live to work on that and defend those folks. I get the sense that right now part of that life below the security poverty line is one where your problems are your own, right? Every hospital that gets popped gets a kind of like, you should have done better, shouldn't you? Right? Like kind of view. And it's not, I'm not saying it's not their fault, but really, they weren't really set up to succeed, right? A lot of the things that they needed to be better about, it wasn't just they didn't have enough money, though that is a factor, but also like it wasn't readily accessible, nor readily configurable, nor readily doable to get to a secure state and have a running hospital with that one IT person, right? So in a way, I'm not arguing for being callous. I'm arguing for maybe if we're all on this boat and like we're all on the Titanic and we're shitting on the people in the basement level who are having a grand old party while the place is sinking, and we're just kind of like, guffawing at them. But the whole boat is sinking, right? And I kind of wish we would get to the point where, the boat is starting to split and you no longer have any consideration of whether you were in first class or in the basement because the whole fucking thing is going under. Right? Like, I want that reality to set in. Do I want the whole boat to sink? No, of course not. But it is, in a way.
It's kind of
Right,
underwater.
like-
It's been underwater for a minute.
Dude,
So then
and we have no software liability and nobody gives a shit and Fortinet's still doing its fucking thing. And, and to Katie's point, the stocks dip for a little bit and then they go back up, right? Like it doesn't make
You just said
sense.
the words software liability. That is ultimately the only thing that is going to make organizations meaningfully improve their quality of software and the security of their software going forward. It's like, cars were built to crumple until they had some regulations that said, probably it shouldn't crumple like a tin can if it gets hit. You should have bumpers, you should have seatbelts, like things like that. there are places for regulation here. Probably not export control as the way to deal with all this, but definitely some form of software liability. I will say that there's a reason why the classic amount of time for Microsoft to fully test a patch, develop a patch and test it is about 4 months, and it's now gone down to about 90 days, is because of forcing factor of Google Project Zero, kind of forcing, disclosure to happen around the 90-day mark,
Mm-hmm.
unless there's extraordinary circumstances, which they didn't have that, at the beginning. It was a hard 90 days. But before that Google Project Zero deadline that kind of pushed the industry towards that 90-day target, it was 120 days for Microsoft. And the reason for that was not liability. It was literally comparisons between organizations in the company. That was kind of the investment level that certain flagship products could get their patches to be fully tested and released in that time frame. Office was a big outlier for a long time. They were shamed in front of Bill Gates, and they put enough resources. They said, well, we don't have enough resources. So they got enough resources to then ship patches again to that internal norm of 120 days. So if a regulator came in and said there's software liability, and if you knowingly ship critical bugs, we're going to come down on you, then suddenly organizations will get a lot more serious about not knowingly shipping critical bugs and actually applying some of the tools and prevention, the CI/CD pipeline integration with AI tooling to find the bugs and root them out before the code ships, actually doing threat modeling and trying to economically prevent these bugs from occurring in the first place, right? They've had the tools this whole time, no real reason to apply them. And you just said the word software liability.
Yeah, can we switch to Microsoft then if we're already into the I'm just looking at the clock and I know, how
Yep.
excited
I got it
Ryan is
teed
to
up.
end this podcast as quickly as possible. So
I got it teed up, but I want to put a bow on the Anthropic thing. And the second to last line in their blog post says, as we have stated publicly, we believe the government should have the ability to block unsafe deployments as part of a statutory process that is transparent, fair, clear, and grounded in technical facts. And they make the claim that this action doesn't adhere to those principles. Is that something that's realistic? And who would what would that look like?
Well, statutory implies Congress. So we'd have to get Congress to pass some laws. Yep. That's exactly. You said ooh, and I said big sigh, and yep. Have to get Congress to do that thing. So how realistic is it? We'll see. I mean, gotta get Congress to pass a thing. What my experience is in working with Congress drafting laws is that they will often mean well, but they will have an idea in their head. They will draft an entire law about it, and they will let you take a look at it real quick, right before it goes to committee or something like that, like very late in the game, and they've already sort of mentally and emotionally committed to whatever this thing is about. So one thing I'd like to see in the law drafting loop, with looping us hackers in and us security people who know what we're doing, is loop us in when you're thinking of the idea before you even put it to paper. I mean, threat model the bill, not just threat model the software and try and prevent bugs in code, prevent bugs in legal code too. Because I don't want to see legislation get passed that is worse than not having anything at all.
Sounds good. The other thing is, Katie, I have you on this show and we can't not ask you about Microsoft's blog post, A Shared Responsibility Protecting Customers Through Coordinated Vulnerability Disclosure, where it talks about these red sun, undefined, blue hammer, yellow key, something we podcasted about 3 weeks ago. I just wanted to give the listeners a little bit of the background. In that blog post, Microsoft says our digital crimes unit will continue bringing cases against these actors and those that enable their criminal activity, coordinating as needed with law enforcement around the world. That was clearly heard around the world as a threat to security researchers. Security researchers publishing proof of concepts would fall under these actors that enable criminal activity. How shocked were you to see a line like that in a Microsoft press release in 2026 when we've all kind of established what CVD kind of is? You're the foremost expert on this. Give me your take after reading it, where we are and where it goes. Because I'll make one point. The blog post has been untouched. It's still, the line I read there is still live on the Microsoft blog. So for all intents and purposes, it's in effect. So give me your take.
Well, that blog was problematic in so many ways. You just called out one of the most problematic things, which is that blog was initially about vulnerabilities and vulnerability disclosure. So why would you bring law enforcement into a blog about vulnerability disclosure? And first of all, the fact that they use the words responsible disclosure, and I was like, what is this zombie term coming back? Didn't we shoot it in the head in 2010? When we so for those who don't know, Microsoft did not have its own vulnerability coordination um, policy actually before 2010, before I formalized it. All it had was one line on the website somewhere that said, if you give us a chance to fix a vulnerability that you report to us privately, we'll thank you in a Microsoft security bulletin. Put your name up there.
We won't kill you,
Yeah,
right?
that was the only thing that was there. There was no policy at all. There was no, this is what you can expect from us when you report a vulnerability. This is, what we prefer you do, not do. Don't violate anybody else's privacy. Don't steal data. It had nothing, right? And I had to formalize that thing. But part of the formalization was, let's not call it responsible disclosure anymore. And I had been working on the ISO standards, and I got the word responsible pulled out of that. And it was because of a conversation that I had with Jake Koons. And he's a good friend of mine, but he pulled me aside after I was on an RSA panel about responsible disclosure. And he
Hmm.
said, can we stop calling it responsible? And I said, what should we call it instead? And he said, coordinated, because it's descriptive. And I was like,
Right.
that makes perfect sense. So one, why did they regress into calling it responsible disclosure? Because to me, it is an
In
ill-defined
several
term
places in the
in
blog.
several places. It's an ill-defined term, and
Right.
vendors only use this term when they want to imply or outright say that somebody is being irresponsible. And that
Irresponsible.
is pretty
Right.
much what they were trying to say, saying this wasn't responsibly disclosed. And so they had this disclosure blog where they're already shaming the researcher, taking a private fight public for no good
Hmm.
reason. And then they're also invoking DCU, right? And law enforcement and going after people. So how did talk about like somebody who really stepped in it when it came to their messaging. This was
Jesus.
unconscionable as far as I was concerned. And I was like, who the hell over there, approved this, who forgot that we don't use these words anymore because they're like they just are picking a fight. Like the words responsible disclosure, you're
Right.
just picking a fight. That's all you're doing. You're not helping.
It's almost like you hired a bunch of random fucking people that have no fucking clue how this industry
But how does
works
that
and
happen at
just
a
put
company
them.
like Microsoft? Like, I can't wrap my head around the fact that this is being blamed on, like, okay, this is staff turnover and there's been like institutional memory lost.
Is
This
it
is
like
not.
It's
blame
not
the
staff
intern, blame
turnover.
the AI intern? Like what is this,
Right.
It's not staff turnover, though. It's a very conscious choice. You went for the consultant class, right? You didn't hire a bunch of security people. You decided to go get Bridgewater and PwC people to come manage security folks.
But where
And
are the
what has
security guys? Where's the John Lambert? Where, like,
they're fucking
I'm
quitting.
not buying that. I'm not
They're
buying
all
that. A
fucking
consultant.
quitting. They're all quitting because of these fucking consultants, dude. It's a big company. It's not like in a big the thing about working in a giant fucking company is like you can get crushed. Like violently crushed and no one will
Then
hear
quit.
you.
Then
right?
quit.
And they are. They fucking are. They're all quitting. The amount of people I hear from who are just bailing is insane. And the fact that that isn't a sign to Microsoft, that like the people who've been here for years, who actually do the job, the people at the coalface are all leaving. Oh, clearly what that means is we need more middle managers from a consulting company to keep coming in to, I don't know, beat some morale into them, right? I don't understand. But like, I just hope they're listening to Sherrod. Like, the fact that Sherrod has been there trying to inject this, trying to massage the conversation, I hope they're listening to her. Because, like, it's the last person in that room. And I say that, I love John Lambert, but I get the sense John Lambert's on vacation. Because I haven't heard a fucking peep from him in any of this. Or anybody else. Where the fuck is everybody?
Sorry, Katie. Sorry you got to put up with this raging.
No, I mean, this is the thing. At least it's not my problem to unfuck, right? That's great.
Right.
No, but not my
Right,
circus,
but
not my
Microsoft is a
monkeys.
too big. Right, but
Right.
Microsoft is a too big to fail company where, again, it comes back to it affects the rest of us.
It does
right?
affect
Like my
all of
mom
us.
is a Windows user. Like
It does.
it affects the
Why?
rest of us.
Don't you
Well-
love your mom?
Well, my mom's hospital is running on Windows. And you know what I mean? It's like they're too big
Yeah.
to fail. And at this point, you can't be like, okay, fuck them, let them fail. It's
No, so
Get your mom a fucking iPad, bro.
so I think
Sorry,
though
Katie.
I think the main thing here is like you mentioned institutional knowledge, right? It's not even that this knowledge should live in an institution. This should be industry-wide knowledge.
general purpose knowledge.
This should
Yes.
be like
Yeah.
common sense knowledge that you don't call things responsible disclosure unless there's also the opposite, which is irresponsible disclosure. So maybe don't do that, because the whole thing is about a conversation between you and somebody who is smart enough to have figured something else, something out about you that could be dangerous, right? So you should probably be nice to them. Um, and they have no obligation to you. That's the other thing. It's like people saying that, well, researchers should do this and should do that. Why? This is
Why?
like, why? What, for what reason?
Fuck
This
you.
was my time, my intellectual property, my discovery. I can do whatever I want with it, short of crime. That's the only like red line in the whole thing.
You're
is
turning
like,
it
Even
into a crime.
crime.
And that's
Even
yeah.
crime.
right, but I'm saying like, in terms of like, what you shouldn't do, it's probably like shouldn't
Right.
maybe do crime because probably don't want to, even just for the thing of not getting caught, right? If you don't even care about the results of your crime, just don't do it because it's kind of a bad idea and you could get caught. But the whole thing here is that this should be beyond an institution's job to carry this knowledge forward. This should be an industry-wide knowledge point that responsible disclosure, that term should be dead, absolutely dead, not like carried on as if you can talk about it and it's sort of interchangeable with coordinated vulnerability disclosure. Coordinated actually means you coordinate even if you disagree about the disclosure timeline, and that means that there's no surprises. Because the idea there, and when I actually published that new policy and the new term for it that Microsoft was going to use, I said, look, make no mistake, we'd rather people coordinate until we have a chance to release a patch. We would rather that. But if you disagree with us, we still want to hear from you. We still want to know what your plans are. We still want to be able to talk with you because that is important. And you know what happened? Somebody came in and reported a bug that they had no interest before that blog post. They were not going to report it to Microsoft at all because they were going to release it in like, I don't know, like a couple days or something because it was going to be part of a talk. But guess what? In that couple days, we were able to pull together technical mitigation, messaging and things like that while we worked on a patch. That was super valuable. That's coordinated vulnerability disclosure. It's not nobody ever gets to drop an O-Day. You could probably still drop an O-Day, but just like give us a heads up, because even if we disagree about the method and the timing of disclosure, it would be nice to have no surprises. That's all it is. And I think that is a sustainable thing that the industry should just kind of like understand. Nobody owes you anything when they find a bug in your software. They do not owe you. You are the one, as the maker of the software, who owes it to your customers to do everything in your power to try and deal with that vulnerability, prevent it from happening in the future, fix it. And if it's on you that you've been privately disclosed to, it's on you to try and mitigate the risk of that researcher getting so mad at you that they start dropping O-Day. That's Microsoft's fault too. Absolutely Microsoft's fault. Whatever the hell happened between them and the researcher, ultimately it's Microsoft's fault. Why? Because the risk of that public disclosure and making that researcher so mad, that is a risk that they need to manage because they wrote the bugs in the software in the first place.
100%. It's scary that Microsoft has regressed to the early 2000s, and the people who know better are leaving. Like, where does that leave? Where does that leave the company? Where does that leave us? Where does that leave the quality of software? The other last thing quickly. Do you think?
I was going to say where it leaves you is fucking investing back into it, right? They've been cutting back the actual security funding. There was a time when it was this podcast raging about Microsoft researchers not having any travel budget and not being allowed to go to conferences that somehow crowbarred that back in, and they were like, no, we didn't mean that. It's all cool. They can definitely go, right? Shut the fuck up. Don't tell anybody anything. But yeah, they can go, right? Like that was it. But what we've seen is a steady lack of investment and then putting things under people who don't know what the fuck they're doing. and you clearly have lost all the goodwill that Katie bought you along with her folks back in the day. You're back to being the same, like, oh yeah, the piece of shit that doesn't fix anything and nobody trusts at all in security. And that means that if you want to improve, you're going to have to invest. If you want to bring people like that know what the fuck they're doing, now you're going to have to pay through the nose for it, but it's the only way it's going to get done. And, you know, fire all those fucking Bridgewater and PwC people, and I suspect you're going to find quite a bit of money to do something better with it.
But I mean, why
Katie,
would they?
last 5 minutes.
Okay, but why would they do that though? Why would they do that? Why would they make those investments? Because guess what? There's no software liability. You know, the only reason why, you know, the trustworthy computing memo, the thing that kicked off like Microsoft taking your security very seriously, you know, like the phrase that's used in every single message about cybersecurity. The thing that kicked that off was an existential threat to their bottom line. It wasn't software liability laws. It was the fact that Linux was on the rise. This was the early 2000s, you know, late 1999, 2000s, you know, that era. Linux was on the rise, and the US government was sick of the worms that were coming out, you know, that were taking advantage of Microsoft's security vulnerabilities. So they said, look, clean it up, or we're going to switch the entire US government over to Linux. And that was an existential threat because at the time, that was a significant portion of Microsoft's revenue. You know, the internet was much smaller back then. Patch Tuesday wasn't on a Tuesday, it was whenever the hell they were, you know, ready with a patch. And it was like 500,000 machines downloaded the patch. Wow, that's a big portion of the internet way back then. So there was an existential threat possible back then economically. There is none now. And so there is no motivation for any of these companies, Microsoft or anybody else, to get better at this, unfortunately.
Hold up, Katie. Hold
Even
up.
the most-
We got to come. No. We got to come full circle. Because, I mean, what will do that is just freeing Mythos, right? Let that fucking bitch go. Let that bitch go. And free, just, you know, you can use Mythos as long as it's targeting a Windows product. Fucking, let's see, you know, Microsoft products can all get free pen tests from this point forward, and like, let's see how it works, because they clearly didn't get enough tokens during the Glasswing thing.
And I'd add that the last version of the most recent version of the Trustworthy Computing Memo, which is the Secure Futures Initiative or whatever they're calling it, with their 10 deputy CISOs, CSOs and so on, came because they were popped by Russians, popped by the Chinese. They didn't know, they didn't have logs, and the CSRB report had to rake them over the coals for us to get a Secure Futures Initiative,
which
right?
I had to recuse myself from that report. That was the last.
I remember this.
Really?
We had this conversation.
Well, I recused myself because, you know, I had worked for Microsoft and I was there during the very first intrusions by those foreign entities. So I recused myself.
And they got properly dragged for it, and then we got the Secure Futures Initiative that turned out to be bogus anyway.
Well,
so
you know what's
here we
funny?
are.
They got dragged not in small part by CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike was actually like using it as marketing, and then the CrowdStrike breach happened, and then suddenly all of those marketing materials like disappeared. It was wild. I was like, what's going on? Yeah. But
Life comes at you fast.
Do you think this Microsoft veiled threat and this kind of what's the phrase for when you put this chilling effect on researchers is partially attributed to this 100x increase in incoming bugs that are just flooding them? They're just kind of like putting
they did it on purpose, like to try and like make people not report to them?
I wouldn't put anything. Yes.
No, I don't think so, because the natural reaction that happened was that researchers just decided they weren't going to report at all, which is actually worse than dropping 0-day. People think that dropping 0-day is worse, but no, non-disclosure is actually the worst thing. If you have a researcher who otherwise would have reported to you and wasn't going to use that bug for crime, and they decide, I'm not going to report it to you because it's too risky for me, or you're mean and I don't like you, you have really, really, you know, screwed yourself in terms of your ability to respond and anticipate to attacks. So no, I don't think they did it on purpose to try and like get people to report fewer bugs and pay out fewer bug bounties or whatever. They didn't know what they were doing, clearly, and they decided they were gonna act like, you know, Goliath, and then expect people not to root for David. Like, what? You know.
All right, we're running out of time. Katie Moussouris, tell the audience what Luta Security is. What do you guys do? Juanito said it on this podcast multiple times, not only here with you here, but in the past. Like, call Katie Moussouris to fix your shit. Call Katie Moussouris to fix your shit. What do you provide?
Well, for the past decade, we've been providing end-to-end management of vulnerability disclosure and bug bounty programs. And we've been called in to do some pretty amazing work over the years. And I keep pointing to the fact that right now, as people are struggling with increases of vulnerability reports, that is exactly the kind of thing. It's not just that we handle those vulnerability reports better, but we look for patterns to try and upstream stop them from happening in the first place. Bugs are just a symptom of your underlying security, process failures, essentially. And that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years. So I
How
would
are
say
bug bounty programs coping with this flood, though? Like,
not well.
what are you seeing?
Not well. But I mean, the programs that we are running are ones that are the healthiest that we've seen, because frankly, they are already changing their internal processes to, it's not just the process to handle the bugs, it's the process to prevent the bugs. It's the process to look for those upstream opportunities that you missed, right? And that's the kind of thing. And the other thing too is that we've always been putting the bug reports into exploitable context. And that's something that absolutely at this point, as people are struggling with the volume of patches they have to apply, that is something that they need to do because they don't have enough resources or time to apply every patch, even if they're all critical, they don't have time to apply them. So just knowing the context of what's reachable, what's exploitable, that's super important. So yeah, I mean, that's what we've been doing for the past decade, and we're well fitted to this new era. It's not new to us in terms of the best ways to deal with it. But I will say that more and more organizations are looking at winding down their programs, going private with their programs, just trying to deal with the volume, because even though the AI has gotten better at finding real vulnerabilities, a lot of them, and you see this with the open source projects, a lot of them are real bugs, but they're not necessarily reachable, not security significant. They may be, sort of, yes, it's a security bug, but what's the impact if you exploit it? Kind of what's the worst that can happen? Not much. And so there's a lot of that is causing a lot of problems in
And
organizations.
triaging is impossible just at this scale and at this volume.
Well, and even if you get the triage right, it's impact triage. It's like exploitability triage. It's that next level, like tier 2, tier 3 triage is what we call it, right? Where it's like, yes, you can reproduce the vulnerability. That's tier 1 triage. Like, is this actually a bug or is it a hallucination? That's tier 1. But what is the impact and what is the reachability and exploitability? That's the other context stuff. And then what are the overall patterns? We find hotspots in organizations where we're like, this team needs some help. They're either, struggling, or they're just cranking out, code that hasn't gone through your SAST, and DAST processes. Like they're in trouble, and we spotted them
This is a
because it's
vuln
coming out.
manufacturing shop right
Yeah.
here, right? Like
This is responsible for like 80% of your bug bounties. Is this over here? Oh, it's an acquisition.
woof.
That explains it, right? So we'll find hotspots and we'll help orgs. But I will tell you, it is changing, and everybody is looking to operationalize like agentic AI to do as much as humanly possible, inhumanly, as possible.
Right.
And I think we're not there yet. We're bridging this like human to AI era of cybersecurity, and that
What is this window, though? Is this
Oh,
window a 1-year thing? Is
no,
this a
it's a
5-year thing?
window. It's a window depending on people's resources, right, and ability to apply these new tools. Some organizations, it's not going to be cost effective for them to spend the tokens to find those bugs, right? It'll be more cost effective for them to pay humans on the payroll internally, not bug bounty humans, but internal. So it's all going to be like the models are changing their charging models, their economic models themselves. Organizations are starting to like pull back on how much they're using. I think, what is it? Codex like changed their usage policy and their um, charging policy to per usage, and then suddenly people who were being told internally to use the heck out of AI as much as possible are now
Slow
on
down.
budgets, right? They're on token budgets. So we're gonna see some sort of economic equilibrium drive the adoption of AI, and I think that's going to be the determining factor of like how much of these jobs are going to be agentically replaced versus humans. It's actually, humans become the cheap labor.
Katie Moussouris, thank you so much for sharing all your expertise with us, giving us an hour and a half here ahead of your flight. I know you got to run out and catch a flight. Thank you very much for popping on. You got some shout outs? You want to close the show with some shout outs?
I actually want to reinforce something that Jags dropped in the middle of it. Like Jennifer Wood. Jennifer Wood is a national treasure.
Stole my shout out.
You do it too. We both do it. Jennifer Wood's a national treasure. So she and I met at Microsoft. She pretty much invented the crisis comms at that time, and she would never have let that blog go out the door. But she's also worked at the White House. She's also done, government communications, NASA, all these places. She is and she has a deep cybersecurity background in communications and everything. And I think she ran a lot of that stuff for BlackBerry back in the day. And she, weathered a lot of the storm with the export controls over at Kaspersky. So she's probably one of the most unsung heroes and knowledge concentration
broad experience
experts in this industry. Anyway, if you don't know Jennifer Wood, shame on you. So that is my shout out, Jennifer Wood. National treasure.
Jay Wood in the house.
Yeah.
National treasure
because I'm worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Juanito, close the show with some shout outs.
No, man, she took it from me. No, but yeah, I look, all I'm trying to say here is there are people who've done this before. And this is a message. Honestly, it's not even a message to Microsoft because fuck Microsoft at this point. But like Anthropic, you're in a good place. You're so close to the to that milestone you want so badly. And you just have to admit that you guys are super, super smart at doing the the matmul, that matrix multiplication. You do it real good. The PR, the marketing, the government relations, not so good. Let's get some people who do better, right? You can get help. You have the money. Stop fucking gatekeeping who does your cyber. Stop, Michael Moore, open the door a little bit to some better talent to actually help you out. There's people that can actually do this sort of thing much better. And it's not to put it on any of the cyber folks. We have a lot of friends there that we love who are brilliant. Their messaging is clearly not making it to the top. And it means that you need somebody at the higher levels who's keyed in and understands what cyber actually is, that it isn't Ebola, it isn't a fucking chemical weapon, it isn't nuclear, it is part of the integrity of the systems that you depend on. And if you're gonna make us more reliant on technology, then you're gonna have to make it safer by default.
This was supposed to be a shout out.
Bro, it is a shout out. It's a bit of conscience. It's just to say, it's a shout. Yeah, let people help you. Let people help you. That's all I'm saying.
Shout out to NPR for mentioning the Three Body Problem podcast on their last show. Juanito, you did your NPR appearance, came out. It's on npr.org. Computer malware security, the Iran Fast 16 thing. They did a really, really nice job with it, by the way. I listened to it and they were so excited to explain all of it, and it was pretty cool. I also saw you did like a big GQ, fancy showing off your fancy tattoos with your photo shoots.
They wanted a photo shoot, man.
It's pretty cool. Shout out to Costin in Turkey. I don't know what he's doing, drinking coffee with the family, enjoying himself. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers.
Katie saved him from pissing off the family, right? On vacation.
He was like, oh, my family is upset. Can we skip the podcast? I was like, yeah, you skip. Go ahead. Shout out to Costin. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Sunday is Father's Day. We're going to get one day where we can sit back and get someone to make a cup of coffee for us. And that's our show for this week.
That's right. Happy Father's Day, Ryan. This is your
we'll catch you guys
weekend.
Next week.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Jags, for having me. I hope to come back someday with better news and fewer rants, but this is the world we live in.
You know how to ping to say, let me back on the show. You're the original fourth buddy, so appreciate you coming on again.
Two buddies and a buddy.
Never fewer rants. Thank you.